The dusty street stretched before Delilah Turner like a judgment, every eye in Alta, Utah, watching as she carried her husband's ashes in a simple wooden box toward the cemetery on the hill. She could feel their whispers burning into her back, hear the cruel words that had followed her for 3 barren years of marriage, and now that Thomas was gone, those words had become a scarlet brand she would wear forever. It was the spring of 1884, and the mountain town still held winter's chill in the early morning air. Delilah pulled her black shawl tighter around her shoulders, her fingers trembling not from cold, but from the weight of what Dr. Morrison had told her just yesterday. The words echoed in her mind with every step she took up that lonely hill. Barren. Worthless as a wife. A woman who could not fulfill her most basic purpose. Thomas had died of pneumonia, but she knew what the town really thought. They believed God had taken him because she had failed to give him children, failed to be the woman he deserved. The funeral was small and quick. Thomas's brother stood beside her, his face hard as granite, and when it was over, he turned to her with eyes full of contempt. "You killed him with your emptiness," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "A real woman would have given him sons. He died of a broken heart, not sickness." Delilah said nothing. What could she say? The doctor's words had confirmed what everyone already believed. She walked back down the hill alone, her heart a stone in her chest, wondering what would become of her now. Thomas had left her nothing but debt. The small house they had rented would need to be vacated by the end of the month. She had no family, no skills beyond keeping a house, and now, no future. The weeks that followed were the darkest of her life. She took in laundry and mending, working her fingers raw to earn enough for bread and a rented room above the general store. The women of Alta treated her with a mixture of pity and disdain, as if barrenness might be contagious. The men looked through her as if she were already a ghost. At 22 years old, Delilah felt ancient and used up, a husk of a person with nothing left to offer the world. It was on a sweltering afternoon in late May when everything changed. Delilah was hanging laundry behind the general store, her arms aching and her dress soaked with sweat, when she heard the commotion on Main Street. Horses thundering into town, men shouting, the sharp report of gunfire that sent her heart into her throat. She dropped the shirt she was hanging and pressed herself against the building's back wall, fear coursing through her veins. The shooting stopped as quickly as it had started. Delilah waited, barely breathing, until she heard heavy footsteps coming around the side of the building. She looked up to see a man stumbling toward her, his hand pressed against his side, blood seeping between his fingers. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of a stormy sky. When he saw her, he tried to straighten up, tried to look less like he was about to collapse. "Madam," he said, his voice rough with pain, "I apologize for the intrusion. Could you spare some water?" Delilah should have been afraid. She should have run. But something in his eyes stopped her, something desperate and honest. She could see he was trying not to frighten her, trying to maintain some semblance of courtesy, even as he bled. "You are shot," she said, stating the obvious because her mind could not quite process what was happening. "Just a graze," he said, though the amount of blood suggested otherwise. "I will be on my way. I just needed a moment." He took one step away from the building, and his knees buckled. Delilah moved without thinking, catching him as best she could, though his weight nearly brought them both down. "You are not going anywhere," she said firmly. "Come inside before you bleed to death in the alley." Getting him up the back stairs to her small room was an ordeal that left them both gasping. Delilah kicked the door shut behind them and helped him to the narrow bed that took up most of the space. He sat heavily, his face pale beneath the trail dust and stubble. "You are kind," he said, "but you should not get involved. The men who shot me might come looking." "Then we better work quickly," Delilah said, already gathering her few medical supplies. Living as the wife of a sickly man had taught her something about tending wounds. "Take off your shirt." He obeyed, wincing as he pulled the blood-soaked fabric over his head. The bullet had carved a deep furrow along his ribs, ugly and bleeding, but not fatal. Delilah set to work cleaning the wound, her hand steady despite the strangeness of the situation. He hissed between his teeth but did not pull away. "What is your name?" she asked as she worked, needing to fill the silence with something other than the sound of his labored breathing. "Wade," he said. "Wade Zimmerman. I am a ranch hand from down in Colorado, or I was until today." "What happened?" He was quiet for a moment, watching her face as she threaded a needle with steady hands. I witnessed something I should not have. The ranch owner's son killed a man in cold blood over a card game. When I said I would go to the law, he and his friends decided I needed to disappear. I have been riding for 2 days straight, but they caught up with me just outside town. Delilah began stitching the wound, her movements careful and precise. Wade gripped the edge of the bed, his knuckles white, but he made no sound beyond a sharp intake of breath. "The sheriff will need to know," she said. "The sheriff is probably already hearing a different story," Wade said grimly. "Ranch owner has a lot of influence. I am just a hired hand with no proof and no standing. My word against theirs is not going to end well for me." He had a point. Delilah had learned enough about the world to know that justice was not blind. It was simply selective. She tied off the last stitch and covered the wound with a clean bandage torn from one of her few spare petticoats. "You need to rest," she said. "Stay here tonight. In the morning, we will figure out what to do." Wade looked at her with something like wonder in his storm-gray eyes. "Why are you helping me? You do not know me. I could be lying about everything." Delilah met his gaze steadily. "I know what it is like to be judged unfairly," she said quietly. "I know what it is like when everyone decides you are worthless before you even get a chance to speak. If you are lying, then I am a fool. But I do not think you are." Something shifted in his expression, softened. "What is your name?" "Delilah Turner." "Thank you, Delilah Turner. I will not forget this kindness." She made him lie down and covered him with her one blanket despite his protests. He was asleep within minutes, exhausted from blood loss and days of hard riding. Delilah sat in her single chair and watched him sleep, wondering what on earth she had just gotten herself into. But for the first time in months, she felt something other than emptiness. She felt needed. She felt useful. It was a small thing, but it warmed her from the inside out. Wade woke just after dawn, disoriented and reaching for a gun that was no longer at his hip. Delilah had hidden his gun belt under the floorboards, a precaution that now seemed wise. "Easy," she said from her position by the window. "You are safe. No one came looking." He relaxed back against the pillow, his hand going to his bandaged ribs. "You are still here." "This is my room," she said with a slight smile. "Where else would I be? I thought maybe you would have second thoughts, turn me in for the reward." "Is there a reward?" "Probably by now." Delilah shook her head. "I am not interested in blood money. Can you stand? You should eat something." She helped him sit up and brought him bread and cheese, the last of her provisions. He ate slowly, watching her with those keen gray eyes. "You gave me your food," he said. "What will you eat?" "I will manage. I always do." "Tell me about yourself, Delilah Turner. What brings a woman like you to be living alone in a room above a general store?" The question was gentle, but it still struck a nerve. Delilah looked away, focusing on the street below. "I am a widow. My husband died 2 months ago. He left me with nothing but debts and a reputation as the woman who could not give him children. The doctor says I am barren. The town says I am worthless. So here I am, taking in laundry and waiting for whatever comes next." The words came out flat and emotionless, a recitation of facts she had repeated to herself so many times they had lost their power to hurt. Or so she thought. But when she glanced back at Wade, the look on his face made her throat tighten. "That doctor is a fool," Wade said quietly. "And so is anyone who thinks a woman's worth is measured by her womb. You saved my life yesterday. You took a risk for a stranger without asking for anything in return. That makes you about the least worthless person I have ever met." Delilah blinked rapidly, determined not to cry in front of this man. No one had said anything kind to her in so long that she had forgotten what it felt like. "You do not know me. I know enough. I know you have a good heart and steady hands. I know you are brave. The rest is just details." She did cry then, just a few tears that she wiped away quickly, embarrassed by her own weakness. Wade stood up carefully, holding his injured side, and crossed the small room to her. He did not touch her, just stood close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I am sorry," he said. "I did not mean to upset you." "You did not," Delilah said, her voice thick. "I just forgot that people could be kind. It has been a difficult few months." "I imagine it has been." They stood there in the morning light, 2 wounded people who had found each other by accident, and Delilah felt something shift inside her chest. It was too soon to call it hope, but it was something. Something that felt like the first breath after being underwater too long. Wade stayed 3 days. He kept to her room while she worked, and in the evenings they talked. He told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 16, about drifting west in search of work and purpose. She told him about her childhood in an orphanage in Denver, about marrying Thomas because he was kind and she had nowhere else to go, about the slow realization that she would never be enough for him, or for anyone. "You were enough," Wade said on the third night, his voice fierce. "He was lucky to have you. Any man would be. You do not have to say that. I am not saying it to be polite. I am saying it because it is true. These past 3 days, watching you work yourself to exhaustion for pennies, watching you share your food when you barely have enough for yourself, listening to you talk about your life like you have to apologize for existing. It makes me angry, not at you, at everyone who made you feel this way." Delilah looked at him across the small room. His wound was healing well, the color back in his face. Tomorrow he would leave, and she would go back to being alone. The thought made her chest ache. "What will you do?" she asked. "Where will you go?" Wade was quiet for a long moment. "I have been thinking about that. I have some money saved. Not much, but enough to make a start. I was thinking about heading north, maybe Montana. There is land up there, still unclaimed. A man could build something if he was willing to work hard. That sounds like a good plan. Come with me." The words hung in the air between them. Delilah stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "Come with me," Wade repeated, leaning forward in his chair. "I know it is sudden. I know we barely know each other. But I feel like I have known you much longer than 3 days. And I think you feel it too. Wade, you do not want me. You heard what I said. I cannot give you children. I cannot give you a family. You should find a woman who can." "I want you," he said simply. "Not some imaginary woman who fits what society says I should want. You, Delilah Turner, who stitched me up without asking questions, who fed me her last meal, who works until her hands bleed and never complains, who smiles like sunrise when she forgets to be sad. I want you. You do not know what you are saying. I know exactly what I'm saying." He stood and crossed to her, kneeling in front of her chair so they were eye to eye. "I am not asking you to love me, not yet. I am just asking you to give us a chance. Come north with me. We will file a homestead claim, build a house, work the land. Maybe love will come, maybe it will not. But either way, you will have a home and someone who values you. Is that not better than staying here?" Delilah looked into his storm-gray eyes and saw no lies, no hidden motives, just honest hope and something that might have been the beginning of love. "I would be a burden," she said weakly, her resolve crumbling. "You would be a partner. Say yes, Delilah, please." She thought about her life in Alta, the pitying looks, the whispered insults, the grinding poverty and loneliness. She thought about growing old in this tiny room, washing other people's clothes until her hands were too gnarled to work. And then she thought about riding north with Wade, about open sky and new possibilities, about being valued for who she was instead of what she could not do. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will come with you." The smile that broke across Wade's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He took her hands in his, careful of the roughness and the small cuts. "You will not regret this. I promise you, Delilah. I will spend every day making sure you know how cherished you are." They left Alta before dawn 2 days later, riding out on the horse Wade had stolen back from the livery stable where the sheriff had impounded it. Everything Delilah owned fit in a single bag tied behind the saddle. Wade sat in front, and she wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. As the town disappeared behind them and the mountains opened up ahead, she felt the weight she had been carrying begin to lift. The journey north took 3 weeks. They traveled slowly, partly because Wade was still healing, and partly because there was no rush. They stopped in small towns only long enough to buy supplies. Always careful, always watchful. Wade was still worried that the ranch owner's men might be following, though they saw no signs of pursuit. At night they camped under the stars, and Wade taught Delilah how to build a proper fire, how to cook over open flames, how to read the weather in the clouds. He treated her with a gentle respect that she was not used to, always asking her opinion, always making sure she was comfortable. They slept on opposite sides of the fire, proper and careful, though sometimes Delilah woke in the night to find Wade watching over her with a protectiveness that made her heart flutter. They talked constantly. Wade wanted to know everything about her, not just the big things, but the small details that made her who she was. What was her favorite season? Did she prefer mountains or plains? What did she dream about? Delilah found herself opening up in ways she never had with Thomas, sharing thoughts and feelings she had kept locked away. And Wade listened to all of it with genuine interest, never dismissing her opinions, never making her feel foolish. "What made you decide to head north?" she asked one evening as they sat by the fire, the sky above them a riot of stars. "I always wanted land of my own," Wade said. "Not to be rich, just to have something that was mine. A place where I could build a life on my own terms. When you work for someone else, you are always at their mercy, always one bad season, or one personality clash away from being out on your ear. But if you have your own land, you have security. Freedom." "It sounds nice," Delilah said softly. "It will be more than nice. It will be ours." He glanced at her across the flames. "We should probably get married before we file the claim. It will make things easier legally. But I want you to know, you do not have to if you are not ready. We can say we are married, and no one will know the difference." Delilah considered this. The idea of marrying again so soon after Thomas's death should have felt wrong, but it did not. What she had with Wade already felt more real than her entire first marriage. "We should do it properly," she said. "You are risking a lot on me. The least I can do is make it legal." "I am not risking anything. I am gaining everything." They were married in a small church in a town called Bannock, Montana, by a circuit preacher who asked no questions and wished them well. Delilah wore her best dress, which was not much, and Wade bought her a simple gold ring from the general store. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Wade kissed her gently, sweetly, and Delilah felt something bloom inside her chest that might have been happiness. That night they rented a room in the town's only boarding house. Delilah was nervous, her body tense as Wade closed the door behind them. Thomas had never been patient or gentle, and their coupling had been a duty she endured, not something she enjoyed. But Wade seemed to sense her anxiety. He sat on the edge of the bed and held out his hand to her. "Come here," he said softly. She took his hand and let him pull her close, standing between his knees. He looked up at her with those storm-gray eyes. "We do not have to do anything tonight," he said. "I meant what I said before. I want you to be comfortable. I want this to be right." "We are married now," Delilah said. "It is expected." "I do not care what is expected. I care about you." He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather light. "Tell me what you want, Delilah. Not what you think you should want. What you actually want." No one had ever asked her that before. Delilah looked at this man who had somehow become her husband, this good, kind man who had shown her more tenderness in 3 weeks than she had known in her entire life. And she made a decision. "I want you to hold me," she said quietly. "I want to fall asleep next to you and wake up knowing I am safe. Can we start with that?" "We can start with that," Wade agreed. "We have all the time in the world, sweetheart. There is no rush." They undressed modestly, turning away from each other, and climbed under the covers. Wade pulled her close, her back against his chest, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist. Delilah had never felt so safe in her life. She laced her fingers through his and closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, she slept without nightmares. Over the following weeks, they made their way deeper into Montana territory. The land was vast and beautiful, rolling plains giving way to mountains, rivers cutting through valleys like silver threads. Wade was looking for something specific, though he could not quite articulate what. He would know it when he saw it, he said. They found it on a warm June afternoon, a valley nestled between 2 ridges with a stream running through it. There were trees for timber, good grazing land for cattle, rich soil for crops. It was far from any town, isolated and wild, but to Wade, it was perfect. He dismounted and walked the land, Delilah following, watching his face light up with possibility. "This is it," he said finally, turning to her with a grin. "This is where we build our life. What do you think?" Delilah looked around at the untamed beauty, the endless sky, the mountains standing guard in the distance. It was so different from Alta, from anywhere she had ever been. It was intimidating and exhilarating in equal measure. "I think it is beautiful," she said. I think we can make something good here." Wade caught her around the waist and spun her in a circle, laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, he kissed her soundly, and Delilah found herself kissing him back with an enthusiasm that surprised them both. When they broke apart, both breathless, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he said, "for taking a chance on me. On this, I know it is not easy." "You make it easy," Delilah said, meaning every word. They filed their homestead claim in the nearest land office, a 2-day ride away. 160 acres, free and clear, as long as they lived on it and improved it for 5 years. The clerk who processed their paperwork barely looked up, just stamped the documents and sent them on their way. But to Wade and Delilah, those papers were treasure, proof that they had a place in the world, a future they were building together. The first months were hard work from dawn to dusk. They lived in a tent while Wade felled trees and Delilah stripped branches and hauled logs. Together they built a small cabin, just one room with a stone fireplace and a loft for sleeping. It was rough and simple, but it was theirs. Delilah had never been so tired in her life, but she had also never felt so accomplished. Every log raised, every chink filled, was proof that she was capable, that she was strong, that she had worth beyond what any doctor or cruel relative had told her. Wade praised her constantly, pointing out her contributions, thanking her for her hard work. He never took her efforts for granted, never acted like she should be grateful to be there. They were partners in the truest sense, and Delilah found herself falling in love with him a little more each day. One evening in late August, as they sat outside the finished cabin watching the sunset, Wade pulled her close against his side. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. Delilah thought about the question seriously. Was she happy? Her hands were calloused and scarred from work. Her muscles ached constantly. She was dirty and sunburned and exhausted. And yet, "Yes," she said, surprised by how true it was. "I am happy, are you?" "Happier than I have ever been," Wade said. He kissed the top of her head. "You know, I was thinking, we should build a bigger house eventually. Maybe add another room or two." Delilah tensed slightly, knowing where this was going. "Wade, I told you, I cannot give you children. I know what you told me. I know what some doctor said. But Delilah, doctors are wrong sometimes. And even if he was right, it does not matter to me the way you think it does. Yes, I would love to have children with you. But if it does not happen, I will not love you any less. You are enough, just you." "You say that now," Delilah said quietly. "But what about in 5 years, 10? When you see other men with their sons, teaching them to ride and rope, will you still think I am enough then?" Wade turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Listen to me. I grew up watching my father with my mother. He adored her. They had me. But after I was born, she could not have any more children. And you know what? It did not matter. They were happy. They loved each other. That was enough. My father used to say that life was about the people you shared it with, not the number of them. I believe that." "I want to believe it too," Delilah whispered. "Then believe it. Trust me. Trust us." He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself sink into his warmth. "You are my wife, my partner, my best friend. You are everything I need. Children would be a blessing, but you are the miracle." Delilah felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were good tears, healing tears. She held on to Wade like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world, and she let herself believe, just a little, that maybe he was right. Maybe she was enough. As fall approached, they worked to prepare for winter. Wade hunted deer and elk, and Delilah learned to cure meat and tan hides. They planted a late vegetable garden and were rewarded with squash and potatoes. Wade bought 2 young cows from a neighboring homesteader, 20 miles away, the beginning of what he hoped would be a herd. They stocked the cabin with firewood and supplies from town, knowing they might be snowed in for weeks at a time. The physical relationship between them had deepened gradually, naturally. Wade continued to be patient, letting Delilah set the pace. When they finally came together fully as husband and wife, it was nothing like Delilah's experiences with Thomas. Wade was tender and attentive, more concerned with her pleasure than his own. He whispered words of love and admiration against her skin, making her feel beautiful and desired in ways she had never imagined. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Delilah felt tears on her cheeks again. Did I hurt you? Wade asked immediately, alarmed. No, Delilah said, laughing through her tears. No, you were perfect. I just never knew it could be like that. I never knew I could feel like this. Like what? Cherished, she said softly. You make me feel cherished every day. Wade pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. Good, because you are. You are the most precious thing in my world, Delilah Zimmerman. The name still felt strange, but wonderful. Delilah Zimmerman. Not Turner anymore, not tied to a past that had brought her nothing but pain. She was Zimmerman now, partner to Wade, homesteader, builder of a new life. The transformation still amazed her sometimes. Winter came hard and fast, blanketing their valley in snow by early November. They were isolated, completely alone except for each other and the animals. But instead of feeling trapped, Delilah found the intimacy comforting. They spent long evenings by the fire, Wade carving and Delilah mending or knitting. They talked about everything and nothing, played cards, read aloud from the few books they owned. Wade taught her to play chess with a set his father had carved. She taught him songs she had learned in the orphanage. On Christmas morning, Wade surprised her with a gift, a beautiful hair comb he had traded for in town months ago and hidden away. It was inlaid with mother of pearl, and more elegant than anything Delilah had ever owned. She cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness. She had made him a new shirt, painstakingly stitched from fabric she had been saving, and he wore it immediately, declaring it the finest shirt he had ever owned. I wish I could give you more, Wade said, as they sat together after a simple Christmas dinner. You deserve silk dresses and fine jewelry, a big house with servants. I do not want any of that, Delilah said honestly. I just want this, you and me and this life we are building. That is more than I ever dreamed of having. The winter seemed endless, but they weathered it together. There were hard times, days when the snow piled so high they could barely open the door, days when the cold was so bitter it hurt to breathe. But there were also beautiful times, mornings when the sun turned the snow to diamonds, nights when the aurora borealis danced across the sky in ribbons of green and gold. And through it all, Wade's love for her never wavered. He told her he loved her every single day, in words and actions, until Delilah finally believed she deserved it. Spring arrived slowly, the snow melting to reveal muddy earth and the first green shoots of new growth. Wade was eager to start planting, to expand their small homestead into something more substantial. They plowed a larger garden and sowed seeds. They built a proper barn for the cows and a chicken coop that Delilah stocked with hens from town. The days were long and exhausting, but productive. It was in early May, almost exactly a year after she had met Wade, that Delilah noticed something was different. She had been feeling tired, more than usual, and her stomach was unsettled in the mornings. At first she attributed it to something she had eaten, or just the exhaustion of hard work. But when she missed her monthly courses, a possibility crept into her mind that she was afraid to even consider. She said nothing to Wade, not wanting to raise hopes that would surely be crushed. The doctor had been so certain, barren, he had said, incapable. But as the weeks passed and her body continued to change, becoming tender and sensitive, the possibility became harder to deny. She was with child. Somehow, impossibly, she was carrying Wade's baby. Delilah was terrified. What if she miscarried? What if the doctor had been right and there was something wrong with her that would harm the baby? What if she told Wade and then lost the child, disappointing him in the worst possible way? She kept her secret, watching and waiting, praying to a God she was not sure listened to her, that this miracle would hold. She made it to 3 months before Wade noticed something was different. They were working in the garden together, and Delilah stood up too quickly, dizzy and nauseous. Wade was at her side immediately, helping her to sit, bringing her water. You have been feeling poorly for weeks now, he said, concern etched on his face. Maybe we should ride to town, have the doctor look at you. No, Delilah said quickly. No doctor. Delilah, if you are sick, I am not sick. She looked up at him, her heart pounding. Wade, I think I might be with child. The expression on his face cycled through shock, disbelief, and then pure, unrestrained joy, so fast that Delilah almost laughed. You are pregnant? Are you certain? I am 3 months late. I have been nauseous every morning. My body is changing. I think I am certain. Wade dropped to his knees in front of her, his hands shaking as he placed them gently on her still flat stomach. "We are having a baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Delilah, we are having a baby." "The doctor said I could not," she whispered. "He said I was barren." "That doctor was a damn fool." Wade looked up at her, and there were tears in his eyes. "This is the most amazing news. How long have you known?" "I suspected for a few weeks, but I was afraid to say anything. I was afraid it was not real, or that something would go wrong." "Nothing is going to go wrong. We are going to take care of you and this baby, and everything is going to be perfect." He stood and pulled her gently to her feet, then into his arms. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair. "Thank you for this gift." "I did not do anything," Delilah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "This just happened. You are giving me a family. That is everything." The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite Delilah's fears. Wade became impossibly protective, trying to keep her from doing any work he deemed too strenuous. Delilah had to remind him repeatedly that women had been having babies since the beginning of time, and that she was not made of glass. But his concern was endearing, a constant reminder of how much he loved her. They made preparations, building a cradle out of smooth pine that Wade sanded until it was soft as silk. Delilah sewed tiny clothes from scraps of fabric, marveling at how small they were. They talked about names, tossing ideas back and forth on long summer evenings. Wade wanted to name a boy after his father, William. Delilah liked Sarah for a girl. They compromised, agreeing to use both names regardless of what they had. As her belly grew round and her body changed, Delilah sometimes looked at herself in their small mirror and could not believe this was real. She, the woman who had been told she was worthless, was growing a life inside her. She, who had been written off and dismissed, was about to become a mother. It seemed impossible, miraculous, like something from a fairy tale. "What are you thinking?" Wade asked one night, catching her staring at her reflection. "I am thinking about how much my life has changed," Delilah said. "A year and a half ago, I was in Alta, alone and miserable, convinced I had nothing to offer the world. And now, look at me. I have a home, a husband who loves me, a baby on the way. How did I get so lucky?" "Luck has nothing to do with it," Wade said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her, his hands resting on her swollen belly. "You were always worthy of this, Delilah. You were always deserving of love and happiness. You just had to find the right person to see it. You saved me," she said softly. "No, sweetheart, we saved each other." The baby came on a cold January night in 1886, 2 years after Thomas's death, a year and a half after Delilah had fled Alta with Wade. The labor was long and difficult, and there was no doctor, just Wade and a neighboring homesteader's wife who had experience with births. Delilah was terrified, convinced that something would go wrong, that the doctor's curse would come true in some new, terrible way. But when the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, all her fears evaporated. Wade placed the tiny bundle in her arms, and Delilah looked down at the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "It is a boy," Wade said, his voice thick with emotion. "We have a son." "William," Delilah whispered, touching the baby's tiny fingers, his soft cheek. "Hello, William. We have been waiting for you." Wade sat on the bed beside her, his arm around her shoulders, and together they marveled at the miracle they had created. "You did so well," he told her. "You were so strong. I am in awe of you." Delilah leaned against him, exhausted but happier than she had ever been. "We did this together," she said. "Everything we have, we built together." "And we are just getting started," Wade promised. Raising a baby in an isolated homestead was challenging in ways Delilah had not anticipated. William was a good baby, but he was still a baby, needing constant care and attention. Wade helped as much as he could, walking the floor with William when he cried, changing diapers without complaint, singing off key lullabies that somehow soothed their son to sleep. He was a devoted father, and watching him with William made Delilah fall in love with him all over again. As William grew, so did their homestead. Wade bought more cattle and built additional corrals. They expanded the cabin, adding 2 more rooms and a real kitchen. Other homesteaders began settling in the area, and a small community formed. There were barn raisings and quilting bees, church services held in someone's house, harvest celebrations where everyone brought what they had to share. Delilah made friends, women who valued her for her skills and her kindness, not her ability to bear children. No one in their new community knew about her past in Alta, about the cruel words and the condemnation. She was just Delilah Zimmerman, homesteader's wife, mother, friend. The fresh start was more healing than she could have imagined. Sometimes she thought about the doctor who had pronounced her barren, about Thomas's brother who had called her worthless, and she wished she could show them William, proof that they had been wrong about her. But mostly she did not think about them at all. That life was behind her, and she had no desire to revisit it. William was 3 when Delilah realized she was pregnant again. This time, there was no fear, no doubt. She told Wade immediately, and his reaction was just as joyful as the first time. Their daughter Sarah was born in the autumn of 1889, a tiny girl with Wade's gray eyes and Delilah's dark hair. William was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and Wade had to constantly remind him to be gentle. With 2 children, the cabin felt full of life and noise and love. Delilah sometimes stopped in the middle of cooking or washing and just looked around, overwhelmed by gratitude. This was everything she had been told she could never have: a husband who adored her, children who called her mother, a home that was hers. She had been told she was barren and worthless, and now she had abundance beyond measure. The years rolled by, each one bringing new challenges and new blessings. Wade's cattle business grew successful, and they were able to hire a few ranch hands to help with the work. Delilah started a vegetable garden that became the envy of their neighbors, and she sold her surplus in the nearest town. William grew tall and strong, following his father everywhere, learning to rope and ride. Sarah was bright and curious, always asking questions, always underfoot. In 1893, Delilah gave birth to another son, whom they named Joseph, and 2 years after that, another daughter named Emma. 4 children when she had been told she could have none. It seemed impossible, but here they were, living, breathing proof that doctors did not know everything, that the cruelty of one town did not define a person's worth. On a warm summer evening in 1896, 12 years after they had first met, Delilah and Wade sat on the porch of their expanded house, watching their children play in the yard. William was nearly 11, helping his father teach Joseph to ride. Sarah was 7, reading under a tree, and Emma was 3, playing with a rag doll Delilah had made for her. "Can you believe this is our life?" Wade asked, reaching over to take Delilah's hand. "Sometimes I still wake up thinking it is a dream," Delilah admitted, "that I will open my eyes and be back in that little room above the general store in Alta, alone and miserable." "This is real," Wade assured her, bringing her hand to his lips. "This is the life we built together, and I would not change a single thing. Not even the hard times, the first winter, the year the cattle got sick. Not even those. They made us stronger. They taught us we could survive anything as long as we had each other." Delilah smiled, watching her children, her heart full to bursting. "You told me once that you would make sure I felt cherished every day. You have kept that promise." "It was easy," Wade said. "Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done." As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Delilah thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain and loss, the cruel words and crushing loneliness. They had all led to this moment, to this man who saw her worth when no one else did, to these children who would never doubt their mother's love, to this life that was richer than anything she could have imagined. She had been told she was barren and worthless, but Wade had shown her the truth. She was neither. She was strong and capable and deserving of love. She was a wife, a mother, a homesteader. She was cherished every single day, and she cherished in return. And that, she thought, was the greatest miracle of all. The years continued to unfold with a gentle rhythm that Delilah treasured. By 1898, their homestead had transformed into a thriving ranch. Wade's reputation as a fair and skilled rancher spread throughout the territory, and they employed several hands year-round. Delilah ran the household with efficiency and warmth, teaching her daughters to cook and garden, instilling in all her children the values of hard work and kindness that had shaped her own transformation. William, now 14, was already as tall as his father, and twice as serious. He had inherited Wade's work ethic and Delilah's thoughtfulness, a combination that made him reliable beyond his years. He talked about staying on the ranch, building his own house on the property someday. Wade beamed with pride whenever William spoke of the future, grateful that his son wanted to continue what they had built together. Sarah, at 10, was the family bookworm. She devoured every book they could acquire, and Wade made sure to bring back new ones whenever he went to town. She wanted to be a teacher someday, to help other children learn and grow. Delilah encouraged this dream, remembering her own lack of education in the orphanage, determined her daughter would have every opportunity she herself had missed. Joseph, at 6, was the wild one, always climbing something or chasing something, coming home with torn clothes and scraped knees. He had a gift with animals, though, able to calm the most skittish horse or befriend the most aloof barn cat. Wade said he would make a fine rancher if he could just slow down long enough to learn. And Emma, the baby at 4, was everyone's darling. She had Delilah's gentle nature and Wade's stubborn determination, a combination that meant she usually got what she wanted through sheer persistent sweetness. She followed Delilah everywhere, a small shadow helping with chores and chattering constantly. One afternoon in late spring, as Delilah was hanging laundry and Emma was playing nearby, a rider approached the house. Delilah shaded her eyes against the sun, not recognizing the man. He dismounted carefully, his clothes dusty from travel, and removed his hat politely. "Mrs. Zimmerman?" he asked. "Yes," Delilah replied cautiously, moving to stand between the stranger and Emma. "My name is Robert Morris. I am an attorney from Denver. I have been trying to locate you for several months." Delilah's heart skipped. Had someone from Alta found her? Was this about Thomas's debts? "What do you want?" "I represent the estate of Martha Thornton. She passed away last year and left instructions in her will regarding you." "I do not know anyone named Martha Thornton." "She was the cook at the orphanage where you grew up. She remembered you specifically and wanted to leave you something." Delilah remembered Martha, a kind woman who had sometimes slipped the children extra food or a kind word. "She left me something?" "A sum of $200 and a letter. She had no family of her own and left small bequests to several children she remembered fondly. I apologize it took so long to find you. You are not an easy woman to track down." $200 was a substantial sum. Delilah accepted the envelope from the attorney with shaking hands. After he left, she sat on the porch steps and opened it carefully. Inside was the money and a letter in shaky handwriting. "Dear Delilah," it read, "I do not know if you remember me, but I never forgot you. You were such a sweet, sad little girl, and I always hoped you found happiness in your life. I saved this money over many years, and I want you to have it. Buy something frivolous. Buy something beautiful. Buy something that makes you smile. You deserve joy. You always did. With love, Martha Thornton." Delilah sat there with tears streaming down her face, Emma climbing into her lap to hug her. "Why are you crying, Mama?" "Because someone I had almost forgotten remembered me," Delilah said, "and she wanted me to be happy." When Wade came home that evening, Delilah showed him the letter and the money. He read it carefully, then pulled her into his arms. "What do you want to do with it?" Delilah thought about Martha's instructions to buy something frivolous and beautiful, but she was not the same person she had been in the orphanage or even in Alta. Her joy did not come from things. It came from the people around her. "I want to use it to help our children," she said. "Books for Sarah's education, good breeding stock for when William starts his own herd. Maybe put some aside for Joseph and Emma when they are older. That would make me happy." "You are certain? You could buy something just for you." "This family is for me," Delilah said. "Everything I do for you and the children is for me, because you are my joy. You are what makes me smile." Wade kissed her softly. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Only twice," Delilah teased. "Then I am falling behind. I love you, Delilah Zimmerman. I love your generous heart and your beautiful soul. I love the mother you are and the partner you have always been. I love everything about you." "I love you too," Delilah whispered. "Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself." As the summer of 1898 faded into fall, the Zimmerman family celebrated the completion of a new barn, built with help from neighboring families. It was a grand structure, far larger than the first one Wade had built years ago, with room for their growing herd and the horses they were beginning to raise. The barn raising had become a party, with families from 20 miles around contributing labor and food. As Delilah watched neighbors laughing and eating in her yard, children running wild, Wade organizing the men for one final structural task, she felt a profound sense of belonging. These people were her community now. They did not know about her past or care about what some doctor had once said. They knew her as a hard worker, a loving mother, a woman who brought food when someone was sick and helped when someone was struggling. That evening, after everyone had left and the children were in bed, Wade and Delilah walked out to look at the new barn in the moonlight. Wade had his arm around her waist, holding her close against the cooling air. "We have come a long way," he said. "We have," Delilah agreed. "Sometimes I think about that day you stumbled into the alley behind the general store, bleeding and desperate. What if I had been too afraid to help you?" "But you were not. You were brave." "I was broken," Delilah corrected. "I helped you because I had nothing left to lose. I never imagined it would lead to this." "I think we were both broken," Wade said thoughtfully. "And somehow, we fit together anyway. We made something whole out of two damaged pieces. That is beautiful. I have my moments." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. The moonlight silvered his hair, which had started to show threads of gray. They were both getting older, time marking them gently but inexorably. "Delilah, I need you to know something. If we had never had children, if it had just been you and me out here, I would have been just as happy. You made my life complete. Everything else has been extra blessing." "I know," Delilah said. "I believe you now. It took me a long time, but I finally understand that my worth is not tied to my womb. It is tied to who I am as a person, and I am a good person. I have value beyond what I can produce." "You are an extraordinary person," Wade corrected, "and I am the luckiest man alive to have you as my wife." They stood there in the moonlight, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life and a family from nothing but hope and hard work. And as Wade kissed her, Delilah thought about the girl she had been in Alta, broken and despairing, and wished she could tell that girl what was coming. That salvation came in unexpected forms. That love could heal even the deepest wounds. That worth was inherent, not earned, and that cherishing someone was a choice made every single day. The new century arrived with celebration and hope. As 1900 dawned, the Zimmerman family gathered around their table, now expanded to seat 8 comfortably. Wade raised a glass of cider and toasted the new era, his eyes moving around the table to each member of his family. "To the 20th century," he said. "May it bring us continued health, happiness, and love." "To family," Delilah added, her own glass raised. "May we always remember how blessed we are." The children echoed the toasts, even little Emma, who was 7 now and growing more independent every day. William, at 16, was already courting a neighbor's daughter, a sweet girl named Lucy, who Delilah adored. Sarah, at 13, had begun helping teach younger children in their community, discovering her gift for education. Joseph, at 9, had convinced Wade to let him start training his own horse, and Emma had announced just that morning that she wanted to learn to bake bread all by herself. As the evening wore on and the children gradually drifted off to bed, Wade and Delilah found themselves alone by the fire, a familiar and beloved position. Wade pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Do you remember our first night together?" Wade asked quietly. "In that boarding house in Bannock? When I asked you just to hold me?" Delilah smiled. "I remember. I was so nervous." "I was too," Wade admitted. "I wanted so badly to do right by you, to show you that not all men were like your first husband, to prove I meant every promise I made." "You have proved it every day for 16 years, Delilah said. "You have never once made me doubt your love." "Good, because I am not stopping now. We have a lot of years left, Delilah, and I intend to spend every one of them making sure you know how cherished you are." Delilah turned to kiss him, pouring 16 years of love and gratitude into it. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "You gave me everything I thought I could never have, a home, children, but most importantly, you gave me myself. You made me believe I was worth loving. That was the greatest gift." "You were always worth loving," Wade said fiercely. "I just reminded you of what was already true." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, the first flakes of a new century drifting down to blanket their land. Inside, they were warm and safe and together. And that, Delilah thought, was everything that mattered. The next decade brought changes both expected and surprising. William married Lucy in 1902, and they built a house on the far corner of the Zimmerman property, starting their own family. Wade deeded them a portion of the land, ensuring his son had something of his own while keeping the family close. Watching William become a husband and then a father brought Delilah profound joy. He was a good man, raised with love and care, and he treated his wife with the same respect and devotion Wade had always shown Delilah. Sarah left home in 1904 to attend a teacher's college in Helena, a decision that was both exciting and bittersweet. Delilah missed her daughter terribly, but was proud beyond words. Sarah came home for holidays with stories of her studies and her plans to open a school in their area. She wanted to bring education to the remote homesteads, to help children who otherwise might never learn to read. Joseph, true to his wild nature, announced at 15 that he wanted to join the cavalry. Wade was hesitant, but Delilah saw the determination in their son's eyes and convinced her husband to let him go. Joseph promised to visit when he could and to write often. Watching him ride away in his uniform was one of the hardest days of Delilah's life, but she understood that children had to forge their own paths. Emma, the baby, surprised everyone by showing a talent for drawing. She filled sketchbooks with images of the ranch, the animals, her family. Wade bought her real art supplies, encouraging her gift. She talked about maybe going to San Francisco someday to study properly, but for now, she was content to stay home and fill her books with the world as she saw it. As Wade and Delilah moved into their 40s, the ranch continued to prosper. They were now considered pillars of their community, the people others came to for advice or help. Wade served on various committees to improve roads and establish a proper school. Delilah organized charitable efforts, making sure no family went hungry during hard winters, that new mothers had support, that the elderly were looked after. One afternoon in 1908, as Delilah was working in her garden, a telegram arrived. Sarah had been offered a position at a prestigious school in Bozeman. It was a tremendous opportunity, but it meant she would not be coming home to teach locally as she had planned. Delilah read the telegram twice, her emotions warring between pride and disappointment. Wade found her sitting on the porch steps, the telegram in her hand. "What is it?" he asked, immediately concerned. "Sarah has been offered a job in Bozeman, a good job at a fine school." "That is wonderful news." Wade sat beside her. "Why do you look sad?" "I wanted her to come home. I wanted her school to be here so I could see her more often. I know that is selfish." "It is not selfish. It is human." Wade put his arm around her. "But Delilah, we raised our children to reach for their dreams. We gave them roots and wings. We cannot be upset when they choose to fly." "I know. I am proud of her. I just miss her. I miss her too, but she will visit, and we can visit her. This is what success looks like, sweetheart. Our children are happy and healthy and pursuing their dreams. We did well." Delilah leaned against him, drawing strength from his presence as she had for over 20 years. "When did we get old enough to have adult children?" Wade laughed. "I ask myself that every morning. Seems like just yesterday we were building that first cabin, wondering if we would survive the winter. And now look at us, grandparents to William's children, pillars of the community, respectable. Imagine that, two broken people who found each other by accident, now respectable." Wade kissed her temple. "Life is strange and wonderful." In 1910, Joseph came home for a visit, resplendent in his cavalry uniform. He had seen parts of the country Delilah and Wade could only imagine, had stories that kept the family entertained for hours. He had grown into a fine man, confident and capable. When he left again, promising to return the following year, Delilah felt more at peace with his choice. He was thriving. Emma, at 17, announced she would indeed be going to San Francisco to study art. Wade made the arrangements, finding a respectable boarding house run by a widow he knew through business connections. Delilah helped her daughter pack, fighting tears the entire time. "You will write?" she asked for the 10th time. "Every week," Emma promised. "Maybe more if something interesting happens." "Be careful. Big cities can be dangerous." "I will be fine, Mama. You taught me to be strong." "Did I?" Delilah asked, surprised. "Yes. You taught me that women can do anything if they refuse to believe people who say they cannot. You taught me that worth is not about what others think, but about what you know to be true inside yourself. Those lessons will protect me more than any locked door." Delilah hugged her youngest child tightly, marveling at the wisdom coming from someone so young. Her children, all four of them, had turned out well. They were kind and capable and brave. She and Wade had done their job. As the decade turned and they entered the 1910s, Wade and Delilah found themselves becoming elders, the ones with wisdom to share. Young couples came to them for advice on starting homesteads, raising children, weathering the storms life inevitably brought. Delilah thought often about how strange this was, that she, the woman once deemed worthless, was now someone others looked up to. One evening in 1912, as they celebrated their 28th wedding anniversary alone in their house, for all the children were grown and gone, Wade presented her with a gift. It was a locket, silver and delicate, with a picture of the two of them inside, taken the previous year. 28 years, he said, and I still thank God every day that you stumbled into my life. You stumbled into mine, Delilah corrected with a smile. Bleeding and desperate. Best decision I ever made, stumbling into that alley. Wade fastened the locket around her neck. I love you, Delilah, more now than even in the beginning, if that is possible. It is possible, Delilah agreed. I love you more too. You are my miracle, Wade Zimmerman. You saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when I was worthless. You loved me when I was unlovable. You gave me everything. You were never worthless or unlovable, Wade said, cupping her face in his weathered hands. You just needed someone to show you the truth. And sweetheart, you gave me everything too. A home, a family, a purpose. Before you, I was just drifting. You gave my life meaning. They danced that night in their kitchen, no music but the song in their hearts, no audience but each other. Two people who had found love in the most unexpected way, who had built a life on a foundation of mutual respect and daily choosing each other. 28 years, and the fire between them had not dimmed. The years continued their march. William and Lucy had 3 children, making Wade and Delilah proud grandparents. Sarah married a fellow teacher she met in Bozeman, a kind man who supported her work. Joseph, after years in the cavalry, returned home with a fiancée, a fellow officer's sister whom he had met at a military function. They settled on the land Wade gave them and started their own ranch. Emma, still in San Francisco, sent regular letters full of tales of the art world and her growing reputation as a painter. By 1920, Wade and Delilah were in their late 50s, still active but slowing down. The ranch was now run mostly by William and Joseph, though Wade still rode out every day to check on things. Delilah's garden was smaller, but still productive, and she spent more time with her grandchildren, passing on stories and skills. One autumn afternoon, as Delilah was teaching her oldest granddaughter to make bread, the girl asked a question that stopped her cold. "Grandma, is it true you were married before Grandpa Wade?" Delilah looked at the girl, so young and innocent, and decided it was time for truth. "Yes," she said. "I was married very briefly to a man named Thomas Turner. He died of pneumonia." "Did you love him?" "I thought I did at the time, but I was very young and did not really understand what love meant. I know now that what I had with Thomas was not love. It was just survival. But Grandpa Wade, that is love." "Yes," Delilah said with absolute certainty. "What your grandfather and I have is love, real, deep, enduring love, the kind that makes you better than you were before." "How do you know the difference?" Delilah thought about this carefully. "Real love makes you feel cherished. It makes you feel valued for who you are, not what you can do for someone else. Real love is patient and kind and constant. It shows up every day, in big ways and small ways, and it never makes you doubt your worth." The girl absorbed this wisdom, her young face serious. "I want that someday. What you and Grandpa have." "I hope you find it," Delilah said, "and I hope you recognize it when it arrives." That evening, she told Wade about the conversation. He smiled and pulled her close as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a nightly ritual they had maintained for decades. "You gave her good advice. That is exactly what love should be." "We have been lucky," Delilah said. "Luck had nothing to do with it. We made a choice every day to love each other well. That is not luck, that is commitment." "True." Delilah rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him. "Wade, do you have any regrets? Anything you wish had gone differently?" "Not a single one," he said immediately. "Well, maybe I wish I had found you sooner. We could have had more years together. We have had 36 years. That is a lifetime. It is not enough. I want 100 more. Delilah laughed softly. I do not think we will make it to 136 years of marriage. Then I will love you all the harder in whatever time we have left. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. The land they had claimed and tamed stretched out before them, dotted with cattle and horses, buildings they had constructed with their own hands. Their children and grandchildren lived nearby, stopping by regularly with hugs and news. It was a good life, a rich life, so far removed from that desperate woman in Alta that sometimes Delilah could hardly believe she had ever been that person. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For making me feel cherished every day, for keeping that promise you made 36 years ago. You never once faltered. It was never a burden, Wade assured her. Loving you has been the joy and privilege of my life. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Wade and Delilah remained on the porch, holding hands like young lovers, grateful for every moment they had been given. They had faced hardship and loss, triumph and celebration, but through it all, they had faced it together. And that, they both knew, was the secret to everything. The years flowed like a gentle river, carrying them toward whatever lay ahead. In 1925, they celebrated their 41st anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The house overflowed with family, love, laughter. Delilah moved through the crowd, touching an arm here, hugging a grandchild there, marveling at the abundance. Wade found her standing alone in their bedroom later that night, looking at a photograph from their wedding day. They had been so young then, so uncertain of what lay ahead. Tired? He asked gently. Happy, she corrected. I was just thinking about how far we have come. Look at this. She gestured to the window, where lights from various houses across their property twinkled in the darkness. Our children and grandchildren, all around us, all thriving. We built this, Wade. You and I? We did, he agreed, coming to stand beside her. And I would do it all again, exactly the same way. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, they taught us how strong we are. Delilah turned to look at her husband, his hair now silver, his face lined with decades of laughter and sun, but his eyes still that same stormy gray that had caught her attention in an alley 41 years ago. I love you, she said. I need you to know that if I have not said it enough, I love you more than words can express. You gave me a life I never dreamed possible. You made me believe in myself. You cherished me every single day. Wade pulled her into his arms, holding her close. I love you too. Delilah, you are my heart, my home, my everything. Being your husband has been the greatest honor of my life. They stood there holding each other, two souls who had found each other in darkness and built a life in the light. Outside, their family celebrated. Inside, they renewed the vows they had made so long ago, not with words, but with the embrace of two people who had chosen each other every single day for over 4 decades. As they finally joined the party downstairs, Delilah caught Wade's eye across the room and saw in his gaze everything she needed to know. They had made it. Against all odds, despite every obstacle, they had built something beautiful and lasting. She had been told she was barren and worthless, but the cowboy had made her feel cherished every day, and in doing so, he had helped her discover the truth. She had always been worthy of love. She had just needed someone to see it, and in seeing it, to help her see it too. The celebration continued late into the night, and when everyone finally left and the house grew quiet again, Wade and Delilah climbed the stairs to their bedroom, hand in hand, just as they had done thousands of times before. And just as he had done thousands of times before, Wade told her he loved her before they drifted off to sleep. It was a small thing, those 3 words, but they carried the weight of 4 decades of devotion, of promises kept, of a love that had transformed 2 broken people into something whole and beautiful. They had weathered every storm together, celebrated every triumph together, and built a legacy that would extend far beyond their own lives. Their children and grandchildren would carry forward the lessons they had learned about love and worth, and the importance of cherishing those you hold dear. And somewhere, in some dusty town, perhaps there was another woman who felt worthless, who needed to hear that she was not, that she was valuable and deserving of love. Delilah hoped that woman would find her cowboy, the person who would see her worth and reflect it back until she could see it herself. As Delilah fell asleep in Wade's arms, exactly where she had wanted to be for 41 years, she sent up a prayer of gratitude for the unexpected gift of this life. She had been given so much more than she deserved, so much more than she had ever dared to hope for. And it all started with one decision to help a wounded stranger, one choice to take a chance on hope when despair seemed easier. That choice had changed everything. And as the moon rose high over the Montana mountains, casting silver light over the Zimmerman Ranch, two souls rested easy. Their love, a beacon that had guided them through 4 decades and would guide them through whatever time remained. They were cherished. They were home, and they were, finally and completely, exactly where they belonged.